Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners, and welcome to episode 294 of the show. Hey, this week we are welcoming brand new debut author, Bradyn Harrison. Bradyn and I had a really nice chat. Fortunately, it was before this cold came back on with a vengeance, so my voice sounds much better than it does right now. But Bradyn and I had a really great discussion talking about his background in writing, his fascination with cryptids, which if you don't know what that is, that would be like Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, those type of things, which that's a fascination we both share. So we dive into some of that. We talk about his writing schedule, how he writes, why it's important to have a notebook. And he has some really great tips for brand new writers out there, other authors who are looking to get started and things that has helped him along the way. You're going to discover what is Ogopogo, and we talk about one of the old shows from the 2000s, Monster Quest. All that and so much more coming up here in just a moment. And then, of course, next week, Bradyn will be returning with a sample chapter from his book, Sinister Scrawlings. So I'm not going to stick around too much. I need to save my voice for hopefully later this week. But meanwhile, we'll go ahead and hop on over to that interview with our guest, Bradyn Harrison. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back. Hey, I'm very excited this week. I love having new authors on the show. And this week, I've got a brand new writer that's new to me and new to you, and somebody that I cannot wait to share some of his work. We are talking to Bradyn Harrison. He is a writer and artist living in British Columbia, Canada, primarily writing in either speculative fiction, featuring strange creatures or entities, and nonfiction. He is also a cryptid researcher and has investigated reports of aquatic mysteries at Okanagan, Shuswap. I'm going to ruin these names, but we'll get that information here in a minute. And Kamalaka Lakes, and aims to write a book on his searches. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Bradyn Harrison. Hey, Bradyn.
Hey, Jason. Great to be on here.
Wonderful. Glad to have you here. Been having fun chatting with you already behind the scenes before we got going. And I guess I should have double checked on some of these lakes and areas in Canada prior, but that just goes to show, like, us Americans, we don't know what we're talking about or don't know how to pronounce some things. So.
Hey, it's fine.
How you do?
I'm doing really good. Yeah. So for the lakes, they're actually called Okanagan Lake, Shuswap Lake, and Kalamalka Lake. It's a bit of a tongue twister at points, but once you get it memorized, it just rolls off the tongue.
Wonderful. All right. See, and I was actually in British Columbia back in June. I did an Alaskan cruise and got to stop off there. I think it was Victoria. And is that correct? That's in that area?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought so. But yeah, I got to stop off there. It was my second trip to Canada. Went to the Peace Gardens one time, but I don't know if that's actually Canada. It's not really a good representation. But Victoria was very nice.
I actually went there when I was younger myself, and primarily to see like a new exhibit on dinosaurs. Oh, and a bug museum. I was into bugs too, so typical boy stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, in speaking of, I don't know, typical boy stuff, although I guess that's probably not correct for me to say, because I have a daughter who's also she's very big into cryptids. And but that excited me reading a little bit about your background and some of the stories you like to tell, that you are into cryptids. Where do you remember, like, where was that fascination? When did that capture you?
Yeah, so basically, to give some backstory, I was actually a foster kid, and I was a bit of a trouble to like the 4 or 5 other foster homes I went to, but I finally wound up with one foster home that really took care of me. And my parents used to drive me to a pharmacy because the doc at that point didn't know whether it turns out I had high functioning autism. But before that diagnosis, we weren't too sure if it was just extreme neglect or autism or some kind of neurodivergent quote unquote disorder. So they would take me to the pharmacy quite a bit. And one time when we were driving into town, I vividly remember seeing a fish and chips place with a painting of our local lake creature, Ogopogo. So I said to my other brothers, like, "What's an Ogopogo?" And they told me what it is, and my mom said, "The pharmacy we're going to has some merch. You should come and see it for yourself." So, and this was like way back in year 2000. Yeah, this is how far back this goes, kids. Um, so she took me into the pharmacy, and I sort of whisked over to the merch shop, and I started to read about the stories of Ogopogo, this large serpentine creature that lives in the lake, basically like the Canadian Loch Ness monster in many ways.
Hmm.
And from there, I just asked my parents endlessly about it. And finally, they took me to the library and got out some books about the subject. And that's when I started to learn about Sasquatch, the Loch Ness monster, the Yeti, Mokelian Bembe, all those types of cryptids. And at that point, I was more interested in dinosaurs, so that kind of fell off a little bit. But the Ogopogo cryptozoology bit had always stuck in the back of my head. And it wasn't until middle school when I heard of a little show you may have heard of called Monster Quest that
Oh, yes.
I remember I think I remember watching like the first episode online and I was hooked. The show may be a little bit dated by our standards today, but I don't care. It has nostalgic value for me still. Um, so I really got into cryptozoology. I started reading all kinds of books, learning about like some of the really obscure ones like Mothman, Chupacabra. Even though I don't technically consider those cryptids, they're kind of unexplained entities to me. I kind of lean
Hmm.
more to like the Mokelian Bimbis, the Congamatos, the Ropins, the Sasquatches, and I really gravitated to the ones in British Columbia because it turns out that we have some of the highest numbers of cryptids ever, and it isn't just Sasquatch and Ogopogo. We have, giant salamanders, thunderbird sightings, you name it. We have sea serpent sightings on the coast. So that's when I figured, okay, I actually want to get into this. And there's actually was a local group where I'm at called the BCSCC, which stands for the British Columbia Scientific Cryptozoology Club. I know, a mouthful. So
That's awesome, though.
yeah, so in I think grade 9, I think I officially became a member, and started doing field research ever since.
Wow, that's very cool. And I think I read that you even do a little bit of nonfiction about your research.
Yeah, so a lot of the re nonfiction research I do, before we get into the fiction stuff, I typically do a lot of historical sightings. So I go into like the online newspaper archives, just type in like sea serpent, Ogopogo creature, then sightings, and just see what comes up. And another bit of it is I sometimes interview eyewitnesses. I actually interviewed one really credible witness uh, last year, which I'll send you through Gmail, who said he saw a large creature come out of the water, open its mouth, and dove into the water. And he actually took some pretty interesting photographs, which I'll send you through Gmail later on. And then the rest of the research, I just plot out where sightings are most plentiful, and I just kind of go from there. And since then, I have had actually quite a few sightings. I know people are going to say that saying, you're nuts, or you just have your heads in the clouds. I just look at it more as I just look at it more as, hey, there are unexplained things that still haven't been fully cataloged or explained yet. What's causing these? So I'm
Mhm.
just looking to see um, where the smoke leads me.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that, and I think that kind of fascination, I believe myself anyway, that leads naturally into some kind of an outlet, whether it's writing or artistry or whatever, and clearly it seems like it's feeding into some of your debut novel here, the sinister scrawlings, terrifying tales. Uh, tell us a little bit about that, how that began.
Yeah, so how Sinister Scrollings actually came about was back early last year, I was contacting some horror podcasts, to submit my stories to. My inspiration for doing Sinister Scrollings actually goes back even further than that, because in grade six, we actually went on a camping trip at a local campground just outside one of our towns here. And this was, like way out in the forests. We're talking like pine trees and mountains and a little small lake. It's actually one of my favorite memories. But one night we had like a little campfire thing. So all the kids were sitting around the campfire. I had my, little camping school trip hoodie on that the school paid for and printed. Um, so we were just sitting around and just kind of doing nothing, just chatting. I was just sort of enjoying the vibe, trying to dodge the smoke that's been getting to my eyes from the fire. Thank you, wind. Um, then all of a sudden, this Halloween prop cut head comes flying through the air, lands in front of the fire, and just totally freaks us out. And of course, it turns out to be one of the camp counselors who wanted to pull a prank, of course.
Hmm.
And then he started, telling us all these scary stories that have been associated around the camp, like these little local camp legends. And the more I was listening to it, I was like, wow, this is actually really cool stuff. Because I was a huge reader. I was a bookworm ever since I was a little kid, ever since I learned how to read. And however, listening to the stories around the fire, it just I don't know. I don't know if it's just the ambiance or just the way he told the story or just the imagery that he was describing to us. But I just kind of got hooked with the idea of, just telling scary stories and, just reveling in the fun of being scared.
Hmm.
Ironically, I wasn't a huge fan of horror movies, but I then became a big fan of reading scary stories.
Hmm.
So I then went on to read all kinds of, scary story collections in my library. And the one I really remember the most is finding the first two copies of Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And that was a bit
Uh-huh.
of a pivotal moment for me because not only were the stories unsettling, but those illustrations. Ooh, those illustrations. I still can't get them out of my head, but I love it for that reason. So when going to Sinister Scrawlings, I had the mentality of, okay, I can never beat the classics. How can I make it the best work that others can read? So I then gathered all the stories that I submitted, and no one really wanted my stories. So I just kind of figured, well, no use in having them just collect digital dust on my stick drive here. I may as well put them to good use.
Yeah. Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you did it. I mean, I'm glad you did it because that allowed us to meet. So that's cool. Is writing something you've always aspired to?
Um, it started back in middle school because I knew I was always creative and I always wanted to express my passions and all that sort of thing. But I wasn't at that point I wasn't really good at poetry. I was not a good drawer. I'm much better now, but back then ugh, you couldn't pay me $100 to do a drawing. They were that bad. Um, but I then later found out that wait, I'm reading all these books made by these authors. Can I do that sort of thing? So I decided to type things out, and my late mom, she was always really supportive of me, and she said, go ahead, just give it a shot. I think you got the talent. So I
Yeah.
started writing out my first series of books. Basically the first series is kind of what you get if you cross Animal Planet's cryptid horror found footage series Lost Tapes with R.L. Stein's Goosebumps. So that's
Mm.
kind of like how I kind of started. It wasn't really a formal series. It was just sort of a playground for me because I would put in like a template that I would do in IG would just change the characters and the cryptids around. So that was sort of like my first testing ground slash training wheels when it comes to writing. And of course, I started, reading about other authors and how they do the writing. Like I read Janet Ivanovich's, How to Write book. Love a lot of her stuff. I also read and started paying attention to how my favorite authors write. What makes the stories good.
Hmm.
Because I started to notice some very key little details, like how they would end a sentence in a certain way, or how the wording of a phrase would, influenced my reading experience. And then I started to read Writer's Digest magazines, getting some even more insight into the publishing industry, how things actually work. And that was quite an experience. And I even later on into college, I even did a writing and publishing diploma for a while. And from there, I started to learn a bit more about that stuff. So that's how kind of it all unfolded for me. But yeah, it all started with me just taking a leap of faith and writing some admittedly cringy stories, looking back on it. But you have to start from somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You gotta, all of us, we've got to have those cringy stories. You got to have the ones that are still, still in the drawer 20, 30 years later. Maybe they'll come out, make an appearance. Maybe there's something in there that's a snippet of, this is not a bad idea, but I don't like what I did back then. So some
Exactly.
things like that. So fans, anybody that's been listening to the show for a long time know that I actually pulled one out last year from, oh my gosh, a story I had started in 2002 and then put it in the shelf. And then news came out last year, something that inspired me. And I went, wait a minute, I think I still have that, and pulled it out. And now I'm working on that on the side. I've got like 4 stories I'm writing right now at the same time. It's crazy, but it keeps me fresh whenever I get to each one. How about you? Do you like to focus on one story at a time, or do you like to kind of go where the muse leads you?
Yeah, so what I do for my stories is I have like a notepad right beside me. I think every aspiring author should at least have a notepad by their bedside every night just in case an idea pops into their
Mm-hmm.
head. So I have a so whenever I get an idea, I always write down like what I think the title would be, what like a short synopsis to give me an idea of what the story's going to be because I just cannot pants a pants by the fly by the seat of my pants do the plot that way. So I always want to at least plan things out some way, but I also want to give me some leeway because I find authors that try to plot literally every single detail. I find that doesn't necessarily work for me because some of my characters do things later on that I was like thinking, "Oh, I didn't expect them to do that," but that makes sense in for their character. So I
Yeah.
plan things out a little bit, but I also make sure that I give some a bit more flexibility to have changes later on. And then from there, I just pick a time during the day or an evening, and I just start pounding the keyboard, really. And sometimes the stories turn out a little bit differently. Sometimes I think, I wanted to end this way, but I think myself, no, I think it should end this way. Because while I'm writing this, I'm not just thinking about what I want to see, I also am thinking about how the reader's going to react. Because
Mm,
I've read some novels and stories where I thought, the start and middle were good, but I really don't like how it ended. That sort
yeah.
of deal. Um, so that's how I kind of do things. I first come up with a title of an idea, then the plot, then the characters, but I leave myself a little bit of leeway. And in the case of this of Sinister Scrawlings, I already have the stories pretty much written, but some of the podcasts say that you can only have them like 5 pages long because we only have so much airtime. So I would cut it down and then I would plunk it into a document where I have it eventually be like the whole anthology. But then I thought to myself, you know, I like the story overall, but these scenes need to be expanded on. This character needs to have some more page time. The events doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There needs to be a bit more stakes. So I'd say to any person who is aspiring to do writing, just get a very general idea of your idea. You don't necessarily have to be like have to chess master your whole way through the story. You can it This is a creative thing. You could have it change as you go along.
Hmm. I agree. Yeah. For me, it's getting to know my characters before I start. That
Mm,
seems to help me more than anything else. I get this seed of an idea, something that just starts to grow in my mind. Usually, it's some kind of a scene from whatever I'm thinking of this book or something. And if that starts to go, I start thinking about, well, what characters would be interacting in this scene, or do I already have that character? And then I just start thinking about it some more. And if I can get to know the character well enough to understand what their actions might be, then I can kind of go from there. And similar to what you're saying, I like having so, a few things like, well, I want a loose outline, but I want to have room to explore, and let the characters surprise me sometimes too. Because if I can get surprised when I'm writing it, then hopefully the reader will also be surprised.
Hmm. And there's sometimes where just to go on a bit of an adjunct, there's sometimes I just look out my window and a particular cloud formation comes into my view. I was thinking like, oh wait, and then I write down a story idea, or in the case of the scary story collection, I would have like a really freaky nightmare, and I was thinking to myself, Jesus, that's scary, but that would be a really good story idea. So I then I write down the story. So you never know when inspiration is going to come to you. It's not like you go into a coffee shop and sit and suddenly an idea magically pops into you. I would say to anyone who wants to write, engage with the world around you. It's not just purely in your head, and sometimes it could be a little pretty rock or a diamond that gets it going. So um, so I'd say just explore those kind of ideas.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you say that. I actually the short story I'm working on right now, I've been kind of hung up on an aspect of how to get to the big reveal. Let's put it that way. And I've been toying with different ideas, trying to come up with some other stuff and going to my other stories for a little bit, then coming back. And yesterday I put it in order for pickup. It wasn't going to be ready for another 10 or 15 minutes. And I have a travel keyboard. And so I just went to the restaurant, sat outside in my vehicle, opened up the keyboard. And I thought, all right, let's see if I can't figure out. Well, I happened to notice a customer walking by. They did something that got that inspiration flowing. And all of a sudden it hit me. Oh my gosh, that's it. That's my turning point. That's what's going to make the big reveal. And quickly wrote that down where I was so that way I could continue. And I came home last night and put down like 1,500 words. And I think I just have like another couple hundred words to go. And then that story's done. And then I'll start editing and getting ready to turn it in for the first deadline on it. But that it interacting with the world around you is fantastic advice.
Yeah, because if you're gonna have characters in a story, then at some point you gotta have them engaging and interacting with the world around them. It doesn't matter if they're fighting, whether it's an argument or in combat, or running away from a scary monster in my stories, or even just sharing a good moment between friends. It's important to be kind of mindful of the world around you, because I think so many of us are thinking like are worried about, oh, does the plot make sense? Are the characters progressing? Is it doing that? Is it doing this? And I think we kind of get bogged down. I mean, I know I get bogged down at certain points, and then I just have to go, okay, B, just take a step from the monitor, get up, and just take your mind off things, because those things can stress you out. It's actually surprising how much those things can stress you out. So it's also important, I
Absolutely.
think, for writers to take a step back from the keyboard and just go do something else.
I agree. Yeah, that's fantastic advice. So, Sinister Scrawlings came out in December. Looks to be doing very well so far. I'm very happy for you. I'm about to dive into it this weekend myself because Sinister Scrawlings and Valentine's that goes hand in hand. But I'm looking forward to it and looking forward to putting up a review once I get done with it. But how many stories are in this?
It's about 8 or 10, I'd say. I wanted
Mhm.
to give a good range of things. I don't want to like just dump all these kind of stories. Like I see like these self-written author collections that go like 15, 25, 20, 25 plus stories. And I was like, holy crap, how do you do that? And I kind of want to say, okay, this is your first work. You can go a little easy for this. Um, but I also wanted to make sure that my readers got their bang for their buck too. So I decided to, okay, let's go through the stories in published pieces or submitted pieces, I should say, that I feel would have the most enjoyability factor. So I put like, okay, here's one, here's two, here's three, and I figured at some point like eight or 10, that's good enough.
Yeah. And that seems like a good number. So something around there gives you enough to read, but can also leave a reader wanting more. So that way they can follow you on Amazon and be notified when the next volume comes out, or maybe something different. Do you have one of those stories that anytime you talk about Sinister Strongs, is there one of those stories that comes to mind like, yeah, I'm particularly proud of that one?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of them. Actually, the one I'm the most proud of is actually the first story that you read. It's skittering. It's called The Skittering in the Dark, and that one I remember having the most fun with because what how this came about is back early last year when I was still writing and publishing. I woke up in the middle of the night having this really freaky nightmare, and it's basically one where I get up to go to the washroom. And then I noticed that there are no doors, there are no windows, everything is dark as hell. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Um, and then I hear, of course, this is really intense. I don't remember if I have or haven't my flashlight with me, but I remember hearing something crawling crawling on the walls, and I can't see it. I can only hear it, and I hear like this really garbled, guttural insect-like noises. Think of like the xenomorph sounds from the first Alien movie,
Oh
and
yeah.
you kind of it's sort of like that, but like an insect. It really kind of creeped me out. And then I remember like wandering through the house, like moving really quietly because I really don't want to alert what this thing on my where I'm at. And then I think I finally managed to find my flashlight. It was sitting on the floor. Don't question why. This is nightmare logic we're looking at here. Um, so I pick it up and I look down the stairs, and there was like this really distorted, mangled spider-looking thing, just looking up at me for a little while. Like with that. You know how eerie, when a spider then turns to look at you and it just stands there just looking at you. It has that really piercing sort of gaze. I don't know if you ever had that happen to you, but
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of what happened. And then all of a sudden it darts up the stairs and I just bolt from my room, and that's where the nightmare ends. So the Skittering in the Dark is sort of a adaptation of that nightmare. And I think it's the one that I think readers are going to say, yeah, that's really scary, is because there have been times where I think all of us in the night have been awoken by a strange sound, or we wake up to have a drink or go to the washroom, and we hear all the sounds that our house makes at night. And we know that's just the house settling. I mean, it's not like it's literally haunted, but the story kind of dives into the little voice of what if something's in between the walls? What if something's in the basement and it's ready to come out? And that's probably the one that I'd say is one of the scariest in the whole collection.
Very nice. Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to dive into that and looking forward to it. So real quick here, I wanted to make sure and point out that you also have a portfolio site, art shop, a and a YouTube channel as well. Tell us a little bit about these and what to expect.
Yeah, so my website basically is has sort of my author bio where you can read a little bit about myself, basically what you told the listeners at the beginning of the episode just now. It also has the books, and it has a section where it's published. Right now, it's just Sinister Scrawlings, but it also has works in progress. For example, they will see to its right here that I'm working on a sort of like a sea serpent and sea monster encyclopedia right now. I'm actually in getting really close to finishing the whole manuscript, and I intend to self-publish that on Amazon. And basically, it's going to be like an encyclopedia of these, marine cryptids that, for some reason, I thought to myself, wait, why hasn't anyone else quite done it this way? So that's what I am doing right now. And what I also intend to do is hopefully this coming Halloween 2026, I'm going to republish an expanded version of Sinister Scrawlings Volume 1, with more stories and with some of my artwork. So that's there. And also under there, I have stories and anthologies written under Breon Holloway. I used to write for Wild Hunt Press, and so I would write stories for like monsters, aliens, and specifically kaiju. I'm a huge Godzilla nut. I've pretty much watched every Godzilla movie and King Kong movie there is, even Gamera movie, believe it or not.
Oh yeah.
Um, my favorite Godzilla movies, by the way, are Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla Minus One. I just love those movies so much.
I need to see -1. I have heard lots of good things. I know there's a sequel coming out, so I'm looking forward to that. But I did just finish the first season of the Apple TV show and cannot wait for the second season.
Yeah, same here. So after, books, it basically has the where to find me section. It has my portfolio site. It has my art shops, my Amazon page, and my YouTube channel, which basically has me go over, how I do my drawings and some art challenges I kind of put up, like for example, like creating the ultimate shark monster for Shark Week 2025 was one. So sort of an outlet to show my creativity. Then there's contact me, and yeah, that's pretty much it so far. I will be updating the website as more stuff comes on, but that's the basic gist.
Very nice. All right. And of course, everybody, as you know, I'm going to have links to all of that in the show notes. So that way, whenever you get done hearing this interview, you can click down below and get right on over to both his website or head right on over to Amazon and pick up a copy of Sinister Scrawlings for yourself. Hey, Bradyn, this has been fantastic. Hey, I do have, before I forget, I do have one follow-up question, a little bit of a fun thing off to the side. A would you rather? So, Bradyn, all right, would you rather write something where you are now recognized wherever you go, or live a quiet but still successful life of anonymity?
As much as the frills of option A sound, I'd like to go with, living a successful but anonymous life because I know that some people chasing fame is their kind of deal, but for me, I just want to be successful but live a quiet life. I'm just sort of that, kind of small town kind of person. I just sort of like the quietness, but I also like to know that a lot of people love reading my stories. I'm not necessarily out here for the ego or the fame. I just want to do it because I feel like I have a lot of stories to tell, and I want to tell them before my time is up.
There you go. I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've done a lot of events, and it is a lot of fun to talk to people who are fans and enjoy the stories, and especially young kids that come up like, "You're the author?" That is a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, it's nice to be home, sitting down with my coffee or whatever, and just be like, "All right, let's just kind of settle back down again." And
Mm.
especially when it's like a 2 or 3 day event, it's just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to be home."
Yeah,
So,
like
but
yeah, for example, I'm not opposed to doing book tours and promotions. I wouldn't mind talking to people about my work and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'd say that, it's really about the work and knowing that other people will enjoy it. And if several works become popular, well, then that's icing on the cake.
there you go. Well, I have no doubt you are on your way, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future with future books. Bradyn, thank you
Absolutely. I'll
so
I'll
much.
let you know.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a blast.
Thank you very
And
much, Jason.
listeners,
This was awesome.
my pleasure. And listeners, as you know, Bradyn will be back next week with a sample from Sinister Scrawlings. Until then, everybody, take care.